And joining us now are two very, very special guests. With us is Mr. Ram Madhav, author and senior leader of the RSS. With us also is Pawan Verma, who is author, diplomat and former MP of the Rajya Sabha and is also the national spokesperson of the Jan Suraj Party. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on Times Now. And let me start with you first, Mr. Ram Madhav. The big issue that is on the minds of a lot of Indians particularly is on the issue of, the legal immigration. Of course, illegal immigration, perhaps every country has a right to act against it. But the kind of rhetoric, particularly when we talk about the birthright citizenship issue, is something that has, a lot of people talking about the impact that it's going to have, because a lot of Indian professionals, H-1B visa holders, for instance, who could claim the benefits of that, will now not be able to do the same. How do you see all of this playing out?
Madhav, Trump used to be called as a big disruptor. But this time it appears that he is going to be a very structured disruptor. He came prepared with certain agenda items. One of those items was this thing that you are referring to, citizenship, birthright citizenship. He took an administrative decision about it, but there is already the possibility of it being challenged in the US courts. So how it all pans out in the end, let us see. But these are the kind of structured disruptions that you should expect from President Trump in this second term.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, let me get in Mr. Pawan Verma on that, because, it's not just birthright citizenship. In the first meeting between Mr. Jaishankar and Mr. Rubio, we have seen this, issue of immigration come up. Of course, India has expressed its own concerns, saying that the legal immigration has mutual benefits for both countries. But really, the jury is still out on how it's going to play out. Quite literally, given that, sir, as Mr. Ram Madhav was referring to, a Seattle court has already, intervened in this entire matter, and they have said that until they decide on an injunction, that it should not be imposed. So, a lot in terms of this issue of immigration that we're yet to see, Mr. Verma.
No, illegal immigration has been one of the issues on the top of the agenda, Madhav, and I'm so happy I'm talking to two very distinguished Madhavs. Both of them are friends, and Ram Madhav ji and I go back a long way. He is against illegal immigration, and as per some estimates, there are as many as 725,000 undocumented Indians living in the United States. And his target is really those who have managed to stay in the United States without legal documentation. So they will definitely be on his radar screen. And the fact that already Foreign Minister Jaishankar has identified 1,800 or so Indians in the United States who are there illegally shows our willingness to cooperate on a matter which I believe is important to America and is important to any country as far as illegal immigration goes. And that is on the question of immigration. If you like, we can proceed one by one on the other matter.
Yes, absolutely.
Certainly on immigration, his primary focus will be that from Canada and from Mexico. And there he is going to be much tougher, both in terms of his threat of 10% tariffs on Canada and his declaration of emergency along the southern border with Mexico.
Absolutely. And in fact, let me bring in Mr. Ram Madhav on this issue of tariffs, because, how it's going to play out, which way it's going to cut is something that is not yet known. Of course, he has spoken about BRICS in the past. His primary target, of course, is China, with which there's a huge trade deficit. But could it really impact India is also a fear that many have. Of course, largely we know that US's interests have always been to, prop up India to counterbalance China in the Asian region. But really, how do we look at this playing out, Mr. Ram Madhav, in your view?
So, Madhav, let us remember that India and US relations have reached a very critical level today. We have very strong ties between our two countries, and those ties have become a bipartisan consensus. I mean, there is a wider consensus about the importance of this relationship in both the countries. So what is actually happening is we are coming in the crossfire between America and another country in all these issues. You talked about birthright citizenship. Essentially, Trump's concern was about these immigrants who come from South American, Latin American countries and illegally entering, and then through childbirth they acquire citizenships and all. This has been a very old problem in America. So we are coming in the crossfire in the sense that we also have a good number of Indians living there, and what will happen to them. Same is the case with tariffs. His main target will be about China and the kind of dependence that US manufacturing sector has today on China and Chinese products is a serious challenge. That's why he's talking in terms of imposing tariffs to the tune of 60%. But yes, then when he imposes tariffs, he cannot impose country-wise. WTO doesn't permit any such thing. In fact, WTO doesn't permit unilateral tariffs also. Who nowadays cares about WTO or UN anyway? But how do we handle this is an issue. I'm sure we have enough diplomatic heft. We have enough goodwill with the system in USA. We have to use that goodwill to ensure that in this fight of Trump administration with different countries, we should not become the victims also. I'm sure our administration will take necessary, our diplomatic establishment will take necessary measures.
All right. It's all about, at the end of the day, as you rightly put it, the heft that we have. Mr. Verma, do you agree with that? Because, talking about multilateral forums, there's already so much of disruption going on. WHO, for instance, which is the US is a huge funder of, and its programs, of course, have an impact over here. Do you see this adversely impacting India, or is it an opportunity for India to play a larger role in organizations such as WHO? How do you look at it?
No, first I'd like to respond to what my good friend Ram Madhavji said. You see, you have to understand that Trump in his second term is a new avatar. It's a much more powerful mandate, both in terms of congressional collegial numbers and popular vote. Secondly, he has come on a platform of Make America Great Again. And this time he has a Republican majority in both houses, although in one of them it's a slim majority, but he controls both houses. Secondly, I want to go back to what Mark Rubio, the Secretary of State, said in his first speech in his department. He said, judge every issue by three questions. Does it protect the United States? Does it make US stronger? And does it make the United States more prosperous? So on the question of tariffs, now view it from this point of view. I think President Trump will try to ensure a greater leveraging of tariffs to promote American industry. At some point, it will conflict with the interests of other countries, including India. For instance, President Trump would like India to be a market for some of its major multinationals, like, for instance, Amazon to expand and others. But at the same time, there are very powerful players in India, like, for instance, the Ambanis would like JioMart to control the market rather than an American multinational replacing them. Or the Tatas would like Big Basket to play a role than to be given a challenge by an American multinational. So we have to see what form Trump's tariffs aggressions take place and adjust to them. It is not something that can be put so simply. And as far as China is concerned, I am seeing a strange change of policy in Trump vis-a-vis China. I mean, to begin with, he said there will be 60% tariffs on all Chinese imports. Now that has already gone down to 10%. And even that seems to be under some debate. Meanwhile, he has indicated that he would like to meet with President Xi Jinping A visit in April is probably being planned. There are also talks that even during the campaign, there were back-channel talks going on with China. How does that impact India?
Absolutely.
Particularly in our neighborhood, is something yet to be seen.
Absolutely. And in fact, the latest in those lollipops given to China perhaps was, lifting that ban on TikTok, which was proposed. And Mr. Ram Madhav, TikTok, of course, is an app that we have banned here in India. So what really is the indication? Is there a thawing, or was it all just political saber rattling on part of Mr. Trump?
Firstly, Mr. Trump is also a very transactional leader. So he will certainly, as you rightly said earlier, he will certainly look at what benefits his country and his economy. But also remember, within the Trump's administration, there are two very different strands. One strand is leaders like Marco Rubio, who are hawks when it comes to relations with China, very hardline leaders. So Trump has to cope with that kind of leadership, which has its own views on how to deal with China. But on the other hand, he has people like Elon Musk, who have deep business interests with China. They will probably have a different kind of approach to dealing with China. So on a given issue, who will prevail over Trump and which benefits would Trump see is all it is going to be finally decided what will happen, whether it is with China or, take the case of Europe, all these countries. As far as India is concerned, even in India's case also, I agree with Mr. Pavan Verma that he would finally look at what is it that I am going to get out of this relationship. As I said, it's all mainly about transactional nature. So Trump will give very confusing messages, very different messages. What he is doing about Ukraine war. You remember, he said he will end the war in 24 hours. How many hours have passed? 72 hours have passed. Nothing is happening there. And Putin is refusing to talk to him on phone. So what he says or what he does instantly need not necessarily be what we will be seeing in next 4 years.
Absolutely. In fact, the Ukraine-Russia war is, of course, a case in point. But, I want to bring in Mr. Pavan Verma on what had happened when Mike Pompeo had come to India during the 2+2 strategic dialogue. He had strongly stated that US would be backing India, and that was in the context of what had happened in Galwan. Are we going to see that kind of clear, unequivocal support coming in from the side of the United States continuing in Trump 2.0?
Well, I think that is something to be seen, because these are very early days, Madhav. By and large, I think Trump is well disposed towards India. And the personal rapport that he and Mr. Narendra Modi seem to have built, Ab Ki Baar, Trump Sarkar, and Howdy Modi, and so on and so forth, will help, because Trump is a bit of a narcissist. At the same time, we seem to have slightly muddied that record, because when Prime Minister Modi went to America in September, I think, Trump announced that he's greatly looking forward to meeting his good friend Modi. But for some inexplicable reasons, Mr. Modi did not have time to meet with him. And Trump, now back in power, may or may not remember, but I don't think he's a man who easily forgets. So you should never take Trump's policy for granted. But he will do what he thinks is good for America, and that applies, incidentally, Madhav, or even to visas. America needs talent. And India has a pool of exceptionally qualified talent who will continue to be of benefit to the US economy. But on illegal immigration, he will come down heavily. And similarly, we have to see whether in our neighborhood, in his new suddenly toned down rhetoric towards China, how strongly he will take a stand will be determined solely by American interest. A third sector which is important for us is that of high-tech and of defense equipment. There, I think that we already have an important agreement in place. And when we can expect Mr. Trump to be supportive, so long as we are also supportive of some of his rather sensational stands on global policy. And here I want to put in a word, please. And I think Mr. Ram Madhav would be the right conduit to convey it to the current leadership in the government. With Trump, it is of no use trying to kowtow more than necessary. Nor is it going to be useful to oppose him without adequate reason. It's much better to be pursuing our own self-interests rather than trying to go out of our way to accommodate America's interests at the cost of our own in the hope that this will make Trump change his policy. It will not.
All right. Very, very important points there that you've made, several of them, in fact. But Mr. Ram Madhav, the key point, everyone has spoken about the bonhomie between, Modi and Trump.
A little bit.
Yeah. Is the bonhomie of, the Howdy Modi, the Namaste Trump events, is that only going to continue, or are there some hiccups in that road, as Mr. Pawan Verma seems to suggest?
No, as I already said, we must keep a couple of things in mind when we talk about Trump 2.0. Or for that matter, Trump's administration. First of all, as far as India-China border conflict is concerned, we have been very clear right from the beginning that it will be purely a bilateral issue. We will handle it at the bilateral level. We know how to handle it. US has always had goodwill for India, and that goodwill will continue irrespective of the regime changes that happen there. But I would like to urge even Mr. Pawan Verma that don't overestimate Trump's capacity to influence all the global affairs, like what he will do with China in the case of India. No, there is no such thing anymore in the American administration, that kind of capacity. I indirectly told you what is happening in Europe today. Netanyahu is not going to listen to them. Putin is not going to listen to them. Only Zelensky will listen because Zelensky wants a lot of money. So let us not overestimate their power, so how much trouble they can create to us. How should we behave? Our government knows very well how to act with him, no kowtowing or nothing. How to protect India's interests, Indian leadership knows very well. So about a meeting not happening in September also, let us remember, Trump is not the kind of person, he will never forget. Who said? He went and hugged North Korean president. He, despite all his rhetoric, one of the first things he did was to pick up telephone and talk to Xi Jinping. Trump is also a very pragmatic leader. He understands politics, understands political compulsions. Just because a meeting did not happen, he would not start creating problems in US-India relations. Yes, at the same time, we are looking at this relationship purely from a bilateral prism.
Right.
In that, what India needs to do, our administration, our bureaucracy will definitely do on multilateral issues. We have our view. With Biden also, we said we have our view on Ukraine, we have our view on Gaza. So that will continue even with Trump.
Okay. Very, very quickly, Mr. Pawan Verma, a very important point, though, that I'd like to draw out. The kind of commentary that we saw coming in from the State Department where there were political arrests on issues of religious freedom, and even, leading to a situation where late last year we saw, a BJP spokesperson come out to say that the deep state within the State Department is actually acting against the interest or trying to defame the Prime Minister Modi's regime here in India. At least that kind of acrimony do you see ending now with President Trump coming in to the White House?
I'll tell you, on diversity, equality, religious freedom, I think Trump is agnostic. His main concern, and that is probably fortunate for him, us and the world, is internal. His four concerns are migration, tax reform, pruning government expenses, and restructuring government and the deep state within it. And these are very contentious issues in the United States. So he will be focused on them. But how he will react to human rights violations elsewhere in the world, how will he react to the standard American response to religious persecution or claims to that effect, how he will stand to the curtailment of democracy in countries which may be useful to America. Now, these are things which are not unknown to American foreign policy in the first place, and certainly may not be a priority in the case of Trump. But that does not mean that we begin to tailor our policies to suit his priorities. India must remain India, including on the issue, incidentally, of clean energy and electric cars. Trump may be against them, but they are vital for our economy. Trump may say drill, 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 because he's still banking on the old fossil fuels. But for India, it's a very important issue to move on to renewable sources of energy and to green energy. Now, there will be areas of differences. And by the way, in a country, in the world like ours today, there are no issues without global implications. And if Trump follows a policy which is very insular, at some point it will clash with India's approach in multilateral forums.
Absolutely. And in fact, Mr. Ram Madhav, we want to quickly take that question about, the policies of the two countries being aligned and also the role as far as deep state, because you have spoken extensively on that.
No, of course, deep state has been a reality in the US system. What is the deep state? I'm sure most people know about it. It is the current and former bureaucrats, leadership, media, defense contractors. These are the kind of people who continue to influence Washington DC's policy making. That is what I mean. Even big investors, big corporations, they all play a role in decision making in the US system. That kind of deep state will certainly be at least weakened, if not fully dismantled, under President Trump's regime. He is actually talking in terms of taking government departments to different cities in America, so that Washington does not become the complete epicenter of American power. So disperse power across America so that this deep state will be weakened, which is essential because this deep state has a very nasty habit of promoting conflicts, promoting wars where they are not required, creating conflicts where they don't exist. It created so much havoc in last 2 decades. So that will certainly be addressed by this regime, I believe, because they have been the victims of that deep state's machinations. Trump himself has been a victim of it. But other than that, I agree with Mr. Pawan Verma. Again, I'm reiterating that on issues like tariffs protocol, Trump had walked out of it in 2017. Our Prime Minister then declared that even if America walks out, we will be there in the forefront to lead the campaign. So our view on green energy and issues related to it has been very consistent. We attach a lot of importance to it. We will continue to lead or play an important role in it.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Ram Madhav and Pawan Verma, for joining us and breaking it down for our viewers in terms of what we can expect and what really India's priorities as well as US's priorities will be in the coming days. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon.
At Amity, we believe